the interrelationship between the Labor Party and the Greens, get ready for your flak jacket here, Prue, where the Labor leader in Tasmania had this to say in the past couple of days. The Greens are holding the state back. It's only because they ever provide a voice for the few. They do not seek consensus. They ridicule and talk down to anyone who disagrees with their view. They leave people behind, working people, our people. It was a mistake to think Labor could ever work with the Greens. We will never make that mistake again. Now, this dog and pony show happens in and around elections, happens 18 months out from elections, and then when it comes to who to preference, the Greens will always be preferenced above, well, almost anyone else. Including, as I have spoken about multiple times in the Victorian election, the Andrews government preferenced a Greens candidate who sang about date rape 2 spots above a Liberal who was an Ethiopian-born person who ended up forming a small business, eventually running for the candidacy, because basically the mathematics were Team Green plus Team Red equals Treasury benches. So the problem for Rebecca White, in specific to Tasmania, is she can say we're not going to get involved in a formal arrangement. She can say, you know, they're off into Looneyville. Well, she votes with the Greens to get birth certificates changed, that gender is now opt-in in Tasmania. So it doesn't matter whether you're in a formal agreement or not. At some point in time, the disease of wokeness can only go so far, where Labor has to understand that while it is mathematically relevant for them to help with your preferences, their ideas, just because you're 2 steps back in from how kooky they are, doesn't mean they're centrist positions.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would suggest, certainly not me, that there's anything centrist about the Greens. I agree with everything that she said, to be honest. Like, that's sort of not far off from what I think about sort of where the Greens are. I think it's a misnomer that a lot of people in the Labor movement, if I can say, think that the Greens aren't too far from us, but they really... the Greens exist to steal votes in a lot of cases from the Labor Party. We're in competition with the Greens, and unfortunately, I think we sort of fall for them a lot of the time. I think it is a little bit of a stunt in that way, because there's never going to be a formal partnership between the Labor Party and the Greens, you know. I don't think I'd get re-elected to my seat if that would ever happen. But, you know, I think... I suppose the proof is in the pudding. You know, the proof's in the pudding when Labor is in government. Well,
and God love you for saying the absolute common sense thing here, because Nick, look, we get it, right? We have a preferential system. Unless you get 50.1% of the vote in your own right, you have to get a collection of votes from everywhere else to eventually get you there. Now, that means that at some point in time, those that are lower than the 2 major parties have to make a decision about whom they would prefer to see as a government. But then it matters when you're in the parliament and you can decide to get together with the crazy from opposition to change birth certificates in Tasmania. I mean, think about what they did. They can say, oh, we're not in a formal coalition. They got together with the Greens to convince the Hamburglar to become the Speaker of the Tasmanian Parliament, who was a Liberal and therefore robbed the government of its majority. So they're already in cahoots with them.
Look, if I could be so presumptuous as to give some advice to Prue, who
yes,
I'm sure
please.
knows, as long as you think you're in competition with the Greens, you're gone, right? If you think you're in competition with the Greens,
they're in competition with us, is what I'm saying.
Now,
that's different.
If you're chasing them to try and beat their renewable energy target, they're
believe me, she's one of the good ones, mate.
I'm sure, but this is solid and well-meant advice, because
I understand what you're saying.
If you're fighting a seat like Penrith, for instance, which you could have won at the last election, you weren't that far off. The Greens don't matter in Penrith. It's ordinary working people.
I know that, yeah.
And as long as you're fighting that battle with the Greens, then you will be... The only way you'll get into government will be in coalition with them, and then only if you're lucky. You've got to get back...
I don't disagree with that at all.
Quiet Australians are.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, look, she's the MP for Londonderry.
Next door to Penrith.
So look, I mean, this is one of the...
Well.
I like showing common sense examples on the other side, and Prue's well and truly one of them. I know that doesn't help whenever I took you up. Pump up your tyres. Somebody else will slash them on the way home, but here we go. Sorry.
It doesn't help with Labor Party branch members, but I think it helps with my electorate.
Yeah, God forbid And who actually elects you? Anyway, let's... you're correct. Nathan, this is the problem, right? So increasingly with the sort of uber-urban populations who end up running political parties, there are a whole series of causes that become... you know, the kiss the ring sort of price of admission for how reasonable you are as a human being. But when this Labor leader in the Tasmanian election went on the let's get rid of poker machines, she was already sort of heading down the Andrew Wilkie kind of Greens position when it comes to gambling. Well, Hodgman ended up with a majority, and I repeat, on two, in fact it's about half a dozen, but two major occasions, the Greens numbers are used as numbers to unpick what the people voted for.
Yeah, and I think it's. I think Prue's right. There'll never be a formal agreement, I think, between a Labor Party and the Greens, but there is an ideological agreement at some point. Now, the Labor Party now is very different to what it was, say, 20 years ago when people like your former guest Richo was running it, or Robert Ray in Victoria. Now, since that time, I think there's been a collapse in the right of the Labor Party, which kept the ballast towards the centre. And you see it in Labor Party conferences, you see it in some of the policies that float to the surface, and certainly things which I think MPs from say the 80s or 90s would never have even considered are now Labor Party policy. So I do think it's an issue there because, as you say, Paul, the people who run the parties are sometimes a long way away from those, say, Western Sydney seats or the eastern suburbs of Perth, those seats which were once working class, and now they've maintained this this distance. So I think it's more than just a problem of formal agreement. So I do think it's a problem of ideological shift within the Labor Party.
But Prue, it's this thing where, and look, I get it, the Labor Party is a beast where you have a chat behind closed doors and then all have to agree regardless of whether you did or not in the room. I get that. Is this an active conversation that's happening inside the Labor Party, at least in New South Wales?
Yeah, I think there is an active conversation about who we are in the modern world, you know, and I think the Labor Party, it's a very cliched thing to say, but the Labor movement is a broad church, you know, and we have evolved over time. But the need to represent people in suburbs like, for instance, St Mary's or Jordan Springs or Ropes Crossing, areas that I represent, is a little bit different to maybe, you know, the policies that people, you know, in places like Glebe and Balmain might worry about. And I think that that's where the tension is. But the mathematics of the Westminster system is that there are more seats out my way, you know, and most of them aren't held by the Labor Party at a state or a federal level.
So then, you know, just last one on this. I mean, we're going through this abortion conversation in New South Wales where, I mean, I don't know what your experience is like, but I mean, on Instagram, Twitter, you're out there every day, right? And I just mean, there's examples of you out there all the time. And look, people are concerned with their life. It's not that every single issue that we blow up about here automatically becomes something they care about, but I think that sort of it's the tip of the spear where the issues start to go. I mean, did normal people feel the same level of passion that people inside the parliament did about the importance to decriminalise abortion with all of these caveats and complications around?
Yeah, I think it's actually an example that's different to most other controversial issues. I think people feel very personal about it either way. That's the feedback that I get. So people's experiences will inform whether they're pro-choice or pro-life. And most, you know, people are pretty reasonable as a rule, I think, in life. You know, a lot of people, I've met tens of thousands of people, and most people are pretty reasonable, and they sort of don't want to push their view on other people, and they think, look, that's my experience, it's what I think, you can do what you want, basically. I think, you know, there's a bit of hype, particularly on one side of the debate, if I can say, you know, about abortion, and I think they're very organised, but they don't necessarily represent what, not the majority, but a lot of people think that are just going about their daily life, you know, and those people are too busy, don't have time or the resources to get involved with even contacting their local MP about it.